Hello and welcome to this last video of this session where we'll be doing a bit of data science using Python. So I already went ahead and created a quick R Markdown document and navigated to the document here in the file browser just to have a bit of reference on the files that I have already loaded here. You can see it's just the standard stuff that always gets created in when creating a new R Markdown document here. So let's first get rid of all of this. Next up, I will have to copy paste in one chunk of code that probably you won't need if depending on your Python installation. This just tells my RStudio, or especially Reticulate here, to use this particular version of Python where I created a virtual environment to have the packages installed right in there. Again, for just this course, you will not need to really think that much about virtual environments. It should just be handled by Miniconda for you. But for more complex setups, it often makes sense to just have all the installations kind of separate, to not have things interfere with each other. And since I also use Python for my research, I had to make sure that these things don't interfere with each other. So that's why I have this small snippet of code that makes sure that I use the particular version of Python that I want to use for teaching here. And you can just ignore this part, but I wanted to be upfront about it. So I will go ahead and load this, and this just tells R to use this particular version of Python for the rest of the document. So depending on your setup, we might also be doing this in class on Friday to set you up in the correct version. Next, if I actually want to use Python in this document, I will have to switch away from R to Python up here. And then what we want to do next is, because we want to do something with data, and then that typically involves pandas. Again, I told you that there's alternatives, but we won't be covering those just because there's also always new developments. And pandas is still kind of the standard here. So to import pandas, we just add the following code: import pandas as PD. This is the standard abbreviation for using pandas, really. But of course, you could name it whatever you want. But again, the PD is kind of the expected name in a way. If we can also create these chunks up here by clicking up here and then the small create chunk thing, and then clicking on Python to create a new chunk. And then next up, what we want to do is, if we want to call any version of any function within pandas, we just always have to prefix it with a pd dot. So the dot means like within something. So next we'll do pd dot read CSV. And again, you see, we also here in Python, we get these nice autocompletes from RStudio, which is really neat, I think. And then what we want to load is the data slash, this it apparently can't do. What was this file called? So we'll be working here with the Palmer penguins. So this is called penguins.csv. And you can already tell, like, the integration is actually really quite good with Python, but it's not like exactly as good as with R, which makes sense. I mean, the tool here is called RStudio, right? And if you want to really do like a lot of work with Python, there might be different programs which might be better suited. If you're curious, just feel free to ask us. Penguins data. If you want this data set, also just let us know, or you can just download this on the internet. It's a classic example data set. And of course, we still need to, similar to R, we need to actually store this somewhere for things to make sense. So let's call this penguins. And you see already I want to do the R way of things in RStudio. And we have our data frame loaded here. You can see also down here some information about it. But let's actually output this in Python. So we can just do the penguins. Okay, and we get our nice penguins data frame. And this is already a pandas data frame, because you load the data via pandas, which is typically what you'll do. So already this is a pandas data frame in terms of its type. And we can start off right with one of the small differences between R and Python here, and especially with pandas and how things are used. So in R, we always apply like the function to our object. So for example, we would call head and then the data frame. And with pandas, it's kind of the opposite way. So we have our data frame, and then we do penguins.head. And this is going to do the same as in R. So it's going to give us the first, here by default, 5 rows, which is always nice to have like a quick idea of what's going on. And then next, what we can do is, again, I'll just show a few examples. If we want to access a column within the data frame. So this is similar to what we did in the with the dictionary or list. Is that we just use these square brackets to access something inside there. And then, for example, if you want the species column, we just put this in there and then execute our code. And this is, again, gives us the species column. What might be helpful to know here is that in pandas, any collection or any column or vector of values is always called a series, just in terms of its data type, because that can be really helpful in case you want to find out what like you can do, for example, with a column. And again, yeah, that is always called a pandas series. And then a collection of pandas series is called a pandas data frame. And one interesting function, for example, that we can use here is the value counts, which is kind of like the table function. So this is going to count how often each thing occurs here. And this is the species. So yeah, as the dataset name maybe already suggests, this is a collection of penguins and data about these penguins. And there's 3 different species of penguins. And I can also just copy paste this whole chunk. And there's also, these are from, I think it was singular. Yeah, these are coming from 3 different islands. And then we have all sorts of measurements of them, which we can actually also play around with. So let's copy this again, but not do this, to show you one more concept. What again were the columns in here? So I'm quickly just looking at the things we have. Oh yeah, build length. So what you can also do is, I can't copy paste in here, that's really annoying. Let's double check whether this is correct. Yeah, so this is the length of the builds. And we can also, for example, do math with these columns. And that's because under the hood, pandas uses NumPy to have these, like, to do really efficient math on this. If you need to like do some calculations or something, it's actually doing this in like a very optimized way. So what is the other one? Okay, let's add this with the flipper length. It's not really like super sensical, the math we do here, but just to show you that you can calculate with these things. And then see, now we have the addition of these 2. You can also already see that there's like an NaN. So this is the Python version of NA values. Yeah, again, so this is like basic data wrangling. You can just do basic math with things and work with these columns. And if you want to, for example, get rid of some NA values, we can just do this in here. I think this one had some NAs. Let's just first look at the column again. So I'm executing this again. You see the NA. And if I want to get rid of these, I can just do drop NA. And then this is being thrown out. And you also see that the length changed from 342 to 344. From 344 to 342, because of course we got rid of 2. And then we put the, dot drop NA, just to keep the code here. Yes. What else? Ah, yeah. One other interesting function, I'm just going to go through some examples here. If you want to do anything in particular with Python, with pandas, I would typically suggest to you to just Google this. There's a lot of documentation out there. There's many different functions. And again, it's out of the scope of this course to demonstrate all of these to you. Just get an idea of like the right things and like setting you up with Python. That's roughly the limit of what we can do here. Okay, sorry, that was a small mishap with the recording, but we should be back. So where were we? Oh yeah, so we're just showing a few like interesting functions here. So I'll go ahead and add another chunk, Python. And the last one that I think is also quite a useful and often used function is called drop duplicates. And it does kind of exactly what you'd think. So it's kind of corresponding to the unique function or distinct in the tidyverse. And again, if you're ever curious, you can get like many here. So for example, the egg is like an interesting one that's similar to summarize. There's all sorts of other stuff here that you can use. We'll be using the drop duplicates, and this is not going to do anything by itself because actually we don't have any duplicates by default, because now it looks at all the different columns. But we can, for example, also tell this to just look at a subset of columns. You see here again, because we give it multiple values, we use this list, the 2 square brackets, And I might have also sometimes referred to this as an array. That's just because the two concepts are super similar in programming. But list is actually the correct term here. So my bad if I ever use both words. So then we put species and island. So now we'll just have, for every combination of species and island, one value, and everything else is going to be discarded. So let's do that. And we see, yeah, we just have 5 rows in the end. You can also see at the very beginning, that's an interesting or an important concept in pandas, is that all data has an index, which is referring to the position in there. And that's used for like accessing many things. And whenever you reduce the number of data points, the index will still be the same, right? So you maybe saw at the beginning here, this goes continuously from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or actually, okay, here we're already skipping the 3, but right at the very beginning was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, just counting upwards. Here we already dropped some data, so the observation number 3 got dropped. And here we're dropping even more and just having these retained. And then sometimes if this index is like disconnected from what you think it is, it can cause some issues with other packages. So just so that you know about this, that's an important concept already. Again, for this course, it's probably too much, but we just want to give you the context already. And then one more important thing is, because we're just doing all these changes right now and we're not saving them, right? So typically when you want to actually change these, save these, you would have to overwrite the penguins. So this way. And then do your work, which is of course a bit more code. So there's also the alternative here of in place. So almost every pandas function has the option in place. And if you give this a value of true, and important caveat about Python is that like true and false are always capitalized. So it's like capital T or capital F and then true and false for these binary values. And this is going to change the penguins variable. And this is just an important thing to keep in mind, because often I at least also end up using this just out of convenience because I don't want to write this code all the time. But this will change this by reference. So sometimes if I just pass the penguins around in my code, and then I do some edits on it in place, that might also affect like that, or not might, it will affect the original object. So now if I do this with in place and true, and if I just now look at the penguins, let me just run this again, but just the penguins by themselves, it will now have gotten rid of all the other penguins. So just good to keep this in mind, because this can really, mess up your code if you're not expecting it.